Amazing Maurice, chapter the second. So I am putting these on my channel for now, which is weird because I'm also sending them to be put on the actual Swifty channel. That's mostly because I was going to use this channel for like some live streaming stuff to pretend that I have friends, but now I found out that I have really shitty internet where I am, and that is not feasible. So I felt sad and I want to have some videos on there, so I wanted to say that, and I'm going to keep doing it even though it's dumb, because that's just what I'm going to keep on doing. But I hope you will enjoy the Maurice, the Amazing Maurice. The second chapter, much like the first, begins with a page from a book. Mr. Bunsey had a lot of friends in Fairy Bottom, but what Mr. Bunsey was friendly with more than anything else was food. And I know there's quite a few people within the squad who could very much identify with that. You didn't need many rats for a plague, not if they knew their business. One rat popping up here and there, squeaking loudly, taking a bath in the fresh cream and whittling in the flour, could be a plague all by himself. After a few days of this, it was amazing how glad people were to see the stupid-looking kid with his magical rat pipe, and they were amazed when rats poured out of every hole to follow him out of the town. They were so amazed that they didn't bother much about the fact that there were only a few hundred rats. They'd have been really amazed if they'd ever found out that the rats and the piper met up with a cat somewhere in the bushes out of town and solemnly counted out the money. In case you didn't get the plan from last chapter, it is indeed Pied Piper of Hamilton E. Maurice got a lot of interest in the town. This didn't worry him. Cats walked as if they owned the place anyway. It looked like today was a market day, but there were few stalls, and they were mostly selling junk. Old pans, used shoes. There should be a fat woman selling chickens, and tumblers and clowns should be entertaining the crowds, but there was nothing like that here. I thought you said this was a rich town, Maurice. Well, looked rich, said Maurice. All those big fields in the valley and all those boats on the river, you'd think the streets would be paved with gold. The kid looked up. Funny thing, he said. The people look poor. It's the buildings that look rich. Maurice was not an expert in architecture, but the buildings had been carefully carved and painted. However, there was nothing careful about the sign nailed up on the nearest wall. Rats wanted dead, 50 pence per tail. Apply to the rat catchers, courtesy of the Rattus. No one had ever offered a reward of $50 a tail before. I told you this would be the big one, said Maurice. What's a rat house? Asked the kid doubtfully. It can't be a house for rats, can it? And why is everyone staring at you? I'm a handsome cat, said Maurice. Though it was a little surprising, people were nudging one another and pointing at him. He turned his attention to a big square building across the street. It was surrounded by people, and the sign above it said, Rattus. Rat house is just the local word for, like, the council house, the town hall. People were queuing at the open door. Others were leaving, all of them holding carrying loaves of bread. "Shall we queue up too?" said the kid. Maurice says no. The men at the door, holding truncheons and taking papers from those entering, look too government. He enters alone. Noting his continued popularity, a man tries to pick him up but loses interest pretty quickly when Maurice claws the back of his hand. Inside, the queue winds onto a big hall and past a table full of bread and a vat full of sausages which people don't seem to be getting very many of. Watching all of this was the mayor, who Maurice recognized instantly from his gold chain. He was smaller, thinner, and more worried than most mayors. They were rationing food. They'd need a piper any day now. He walked out again, but this time a bit faster, because he realized that someone was playing a pipe. It was, as he feared, the kid. He'd put his cap on the ground in front of him and had even accumulated a few coins. The queue bent around so that people could hear him, and 1 or 2 small children were actually dancing. He waited until the kid had finished his tune and told him off for not being inconspicuous. They grab the money and he leads the way across the square. Whoops, here comes more government. And we know what they are, don't we? The kid did. There were rat catchers, 2 of them. They wore the dusty coats and black top hats of their profession, a pole of traps over their shoulder and a big bag over the other. They each had a terrier on a string that growled at Maurice when they were pulled past. The queue cheered when they approached and clapped when they showed handfuls of what looked like black string from the bags. 200 today, shouted one. One of the terriers lunged at Maurice. In a voice only loud enough for the kid and the dog to hear, he said, "Heel, Fleabag, bag dog." The dog's face screwed up into a horribly worried expression at the talking cat. Maurice washed himself. A deadly insult. The rat catcher pulled it away, dropping a few of the black strings. Maurice asked the kid to pick them up when no one's looking, but just as his fingers touched the tangle of tails, a large shiny boot treads heavily on it. Now, you don't want to go touching them, young sir. You can get plague, you know, from rats. It makes your legs explode. The rat catcher gave the kid a big grin. It was not a humorous one. It smelled of beer. "And then your brains come out your nose," said the other rat catcher. "Your legs aren't exploded," said the kid. Maurice groaned. It was never a good idea to be rude to the smell of beer, but the rat catchers thought they were funny. "Ah, well said, young sir. But that's because lesson 1 at the Guild of Rat Catchers school is not letting your legs explode," said Rat Catcher 1. "Which is a good thing, because the second lesson is upstairs," said Rat Catcher 2. "My advice to you is to keep your nose clean and don't say nothing to nobody about anything," said Rat Catcher 1, picking up the bundle of black strings. The kid opened his mouth and closed it hurriedly. "Ah, you catch on quick, young sir. I bet you'd like to be a rat catcher when you grow up. Hey, young sir," said Rat Catcher 2, patting him too heavily on the back. The kid nodded. It seemed like the best thing to do. He got his face right up an inch from the kid's. "If you grow up, young sir." The rat catchers walk away and Maurice comments on their unusualness. The kid says they looked nasty, like they enjoyed it. Maurice points out how shiny their boots were for busy rat catchers. Even that was not as strange as the rats in these parts. Some of them had very strange tales. The kid looked around town. Puffs of steam come up from grates and manholes, and he feels the sense of someone watching him. He says they should take the rats and go, but Maurice says that the town smells of opportunity, and if someone's going to get rich, I don't see why that shouldn't be us. They discuss it for a while before Maurice notices someone watching. He says they should... Sorry. A man offers money for Maurice, asking if he's a good ratter. The kid says no, and Maurice calls him an idiot. I heard of a man who made a fortune selling homing pigeons, and he only had the one. The kid comments again on the high price of rats' tails and of food, and Maurice points out another person watching them, a girl. She looked like the kind of person who asked questions, and her hair was too red and her nose was too long. She wore a long black dress with black lace fringing. No good comes of that sort of thing. The girl marches to them from across the street, and she does start asking questions, or more like assumptions, that he was probably sacked or beaten for being lazy and stole a cat to sell it, and he must have gone mad with hunger because he was talking to a cat, and everyone knows that cats can't talk. Can't say a single word, said Maurice. The girl stopped and gave Maurice a puzzled look. He arched his back and said, "Prep," which is cat language for biscuits. Did that cat just say something?" she demanded. "I thought everyone knew that cats can't talk," said the kid. The girl starts on asking about his backstory again, guessing it. That he must have been an apprentice to a wizard, and he fell asleep and let a cauldron overboil, and then the wizard threatened to turn you into a gerbil, said Maurice helpfully. "What's a gerbil? Did that cat just say gerbil?" The kid plays dumb and says he could have, and she says to him that he could have gotten 10 for the cat, if he'd held out, because there's 2 good meals on him. Maurice puffs out his tail. "What, you eat cats here?" The girl leaned down to Maurice with a dreadful smile. "Got you," she said. "You fell for a very simple trick. I think you two had better come with me, don't you? Or I'll scream, and people listen to me when I'm screaming." And that is the end of chapter 2. Hooray. I read a chapter again. I feel very pleased. So I don't know if I did any better this time. I probably spent less time waffling on, which, I mean, I don't intend to do too much of it. I am not gonna try and act like old or something. I'm not exactly a Pratchett expert like he is a partial Game of Thrones expert, or at least an expert bullshitter. But fuck off, Mozzie. Sorry, I have a mosquito in my room and it flew into my face. But I hope I'm at least reading good and stuff. If you guys want to leave like some comments or whatever, that'd be swell. Cause it's good stuff. I'll probably do the whole book anyway, just for fun. But if you guys like me reading stuff, then I can read more stuff. I've got Babysitter's Club. I've got more Terry Pratchett books. I've got some sci-fi stuff. I've got books coming out of my ears, because I've got a lot of books. I've got literally 2 bookcases worth of books that I need to force myself to read. So this might be a good way to do that, because I can't read unless I'm catching a bus or something, like in transport. I just won't, because if I'm at home, I just won't take the time to bother to read a book. But yeah, it might be fun to do those things. I didn't burp then. It's fine. Everything is fine. Yeah, okay, thanks for listening. See you next time on chapter 3. On chapter 3, which will also start with a Mr. Bunsey chapter. I really love this book and all the things it does, because everything that it does works so well. Terry Pratchett actually said that he enjoyed writing kids' books because kids these days are so smart, you have to stay ahead of them. And I think he does that really well. I think he stays ahead of expectations really well without being like